Hello everyone and welcome! In today's video, I'm going to be introducing you all to a new project that I've got underway that's going to serve as sort of a test bed for our new FC01 front suspension assembly. I'm also going to be utilizing some tiny electronics that I've never shown before on this channel, but I think these are going to be a real game changer for these model car to RC conversions. Today, I'm going to be introducing this project and explaining its purpose, talking about my plans for exactly how I'm going to bring this model kit to life, and talk a bit about some of the specific parts that I'll be using to make it happen. If you'd like to follow along with me and build a car just like I am here, over on Patreon I'm covering this project in a lot of detail. Every part I purchase is linked, STL files are posted for every custom part that I've designed, every cut I make to this chassis is detailed, how I wired this all together, it's all there, and I'm really trying to document everything as clearly and thoroughly as possible so anyone can follow along and build a car just like I am here. Of course, with that said, this build is certainly not for the faint of heart. There's going to be lots of tiny parts that have to function correctly, small components that need to be 3D printed, and of course, patience, persistence, and problem solving are often required for projects like these. But if you're up for a challenge, be sure to check that out. I have posted that link down below in the description. As always, if you have any questions about any aspects of this build, always feel free to send us a message. And if you did something different or have an idea to improve upon what I did, please feel free to post that as well. I always enjoy seeing what you all build and any ideas that you have. But for the rest of you just here to witness the madness, well, let's dive right into this project and start bringing this car to life. The goal for this project is simple. Build a realistic-looking, reliable, fully functioning RC car from this Revell 1965 Shelby GT350 model kit. I'll be utilizing our new FC01 front suspension assembly up front and an MA10 axle in the rear. Unlike many of the model car to RC conversions that I've showcased more recently, this one will have more emphasis on realism rather than performance. Also, I'll be using the chassis piece that's included with this model kit rather than 3D printing one. 1/87th scale electronics, generally intended for smaller RC vehicles, will be used. These electronics have been out for a while now, but it wasn't until more recently that I got my hands on some and began experimenting with them. While the performance offered from these electronics will be far less than what I typically use, because this build emphasizes realism and I want to make as few modifications to the model kit as possible, these electronics will be ideal for this project. As for the model kit, Revell and previously Monogram has released this kit numerous times over the years in several different flavors, so if you'll be building one of these cars along with me, keep this in mind as these other kits which use the same chassis piece will work. The 65 GT350 probably doesn't need much introduction as this was the first Shelby Mustang offered for sale. To some, this is the most pure Shelby Mustang, seeing it as a more minimal compromise race car for the streets, unlike some of the later cars which offered more luxury features. It's certainly going to be a lot of fun recreating this car in 1/24th scale. I plan on building a stock appearing GT350 with white paint and blue stripes. The final car will probably be pretty much box stock, aside of course from all the parts needed to make this car RC. There is one area of this car, however, that I'm not going to worry about making look realistic, and that's the engine compartment. The reason for this is that the firewall and inner fenders have already been removed from this body, so instead of remaking all of these parts, I plan on just mounting all of the electronics under the hood for easy access, and I'll save creating a realistic engine bay for my next build. Overall, I think this project should be pretty straightforward and not pose too much of a challenge. This new FC01 assembly is really going to make life easy, as essentially I can just chop off the front frame section of this chassis and mount this assembly in its place, so that part of the project should be pretty easy and straightforward. Now the rear axle and suspension, on the other hand, it will be a little more of a challenge. I need to modify this rear section of the chassis piece to accommodate the suspension components and hopefully allow this axle to have a decent amount of travel. My plan is to go with a 3-link with panhard rear suspension. As you can see, I may need to open up the drive shaft tunnel just a little bit, but it might just fit as is. Of course, I do expect there to be a few challenges and little hurdles here and there, but all in all, like I said, I think this build should be pretty straightforward. So I wanted to talk a bit about these new electronics that I'll be using. The N20 motor and micro steering servo are nothing new here, but the ESC and receiver as well as the battery are. These are actually designed for use in smaller scale projects such as Hot Wheels cars or even 1/87th scale trucks, but they can also be used for larger applications when scale realism is a priority, such as this. Now of course, with just a 1S LiPo battery and a 3-volt motor with a lot of gear reduction, this car is not going to be fast. But the ability to hide these components almost anywhere, whether that be the trunk, under the hood, under the seats, and the ability to use this tiny magnet wire is more than a fair trade-off if you ask me. It all just comes down to what you want from your build. If speed is a priority, you'll need to sacrifice having a realistic looking engine bay and interior, but if realism is what you want, you'll have to sacrifice performance. If you are willing to make that sacrifice, the possibilities almost seem endless when using electronics this small, so I'm very excited not only for this project, but the other projects utilizing these components that are coming in the future. This is the kind of projects that I was dreaming about when I first got into this hobby, and to see it coming together now here is really cool. Now, I believe most of these tiny 1/87th scale components require you to solder the wires on yourself, although I think I have seen some pre-soldered ones as well. As you can see, I've already soldered everything and connected each of these components together to do some tests. Soldering is never my favorite part of these projects, but I got everything connected and working just fine. And if just having electronics this small isn't cool enough, I could also add additional things like LED lights and other stuff too, but I figured I'd keep it simple to start. But I believe what I have here is an 8-channel receiver, so that leaves you quite a bit of room for some additional stuff. I don't know if I've ever seen anybody do it with one of these receivers, but building a lowrider is like the first thing that came to my mind with all of those extra channels. I don't know if it's possible or how easy that would be, but that would be awesome. Now, like I said, wiring and soldering, it isn't really my favorite part of these projects, but it's all pretty straightforward. VCC goes to the positive side of the battery, ground goes to the negative side, connect the ESC to the receiver, and connect the servo to the receiver as well, and bind your transmitter, and you should be good to go. Now, if you are going to use the exact same components that I have here, I did go ahead and post a simple wiring diagram over on Patreon, but again, just make sure that the seller has clearly shown what's what as far as the VCC, ground, channel 1, 2, 3, etc. And as long as you have that info, it should be pretty easy to get everything wired. This should definitely go without saying, but I'll say it anyways. Make sure the receiver that you choose and the transmitter that you want to use are compatible with each other. In my case, this receiver is compatible with certain FlySky transmitters, such as this one here. The seller should specify what transmitters the receiver is compatible with. FlySky definitely seems to be the most popular, but I think there might be some other options out there as well. Now, as this is sort of going to be a test bed for some more ambitious projects to come, but as I'm kind of sitting here and learning a bit, my wires are all kind of crazy here, as you can see. And for this build, it won't really matter since I can just cram everything under the hood. But I think for future projects, what I'll do is I'll figure out exactly where I want to mount everything on the car, whether that be in the trunk or on the firewall or wherever, get each component mounted in place, and then run the wires along the chassis from one component to another, not too unlike how the wiring would be on a full-size car. Basically mount the electronics in the car and then wire them together. Or at least figure out precisely how long each wire needs to be. But again, so many possibilities with these electronics, and I'm really looking forward to incorporating these into some future builds, and of course showcasing those projects right here on the channel, but right now my focus is on getting this GT350 up and running. Really excited for that, and I hope you all are as well. Be sure to stay tuned for more on this project, and if you want to build a similar car yourself, like I said, link is below. But that's going to be all for today's video. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.